You are listening to KC Sports Network, the #1 podcast network for today's Kansas City sports fans. With former players from your favorite teams, informed perspectives, and former insiders, this is the place for you. KC Sports Network is proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
Welcome into another 3-Ma. I am John Kurtz, joined by Derek Young from K-State Online, Cole Manbeck, former beat writer, Manhattan Mercury. K-State falls 34-27. Furious comeback, but not enough to dig out of a terrible first-half hole, and they lose to Texas and lose controlling their own destiny in the Big 12 title race. We'll break all that down because it's going to be a wild last 3 weeks of the season with everybody at the top, everybody in contention playing seemingly everybody else in contention. But for now, we're all kind of licking our wounds a bit here. You might need some 360 vodka or some Ben Holiday bottled and bond bourbon to help out with that. You know, I hear it can alleviate some of the pain, at least temporarily. But from Holiday Distillery, check all that out. Or if you're getting ready for another night game, you're going to have a lot of time to sit around, watch games on Saturday. If you're going to Waco, certainly bring the 360 vodka and Ben Holiday bottled and bond bourbon along. But support Holiday Distillery. They've been great supporters of us, and they are K-State people as well. Okay, frustrating one. K-State falls behind 31-10 in the first half, gave up 3 straight 75-yard touchdown drives to Texas to start the game. And ultimately, it was just too much of a hole to dig out of for this team that did complete a furious comeback in the second half. And really, I guess I say complete, not quite complete, because with the ball late in the game, about 35 seconds to go, Adrian Martinez fumbles. Second fumble on the drive. This time it was actually lost, and K-State goes down. And, you know, I mean, I think there are a lot of elements in play here. A lot of people want to talk about Chris Kleiman's game management, kind of clock management coming down the stretch. Did they start the right quarterback, defense in the first half? In some ways, you also just have to tip your cap to Texas in that they came out in the first half and played about as well as you could possibly play and exploited the athleticism advantages that they had over K-State and used Bijan Robinson for 160-plus yards in the first half.
Coming off a bye, I thought that, you know, at least probably for 2/3 of that game, Texas probably played their best game of the year. So some of this is just unfortunate timing on Kansas State's part, because when Texas plays their best game, they're pretty good. They got some dudes over there. So in Austin, and the Longhorns took it to Kansas State. For me, the problem was the defense, because that's why you were in the hole that you were in my opinion. Yeah, you can complain a little bit about the offense. It wasn't great in the first half, but it wasn't atrocious. The defense was. Texas never punted in the first half. The only stop, I think, was the fumble that Echo Boydo forced, which was a hell of a play by him. And quite frankly, if he doesn't make that play, it was probably 38-10 at halftime. Now, the offense did contribute to that with Adrian Martinez's a late second quarter interception, probably trying to do too much. Some people would say, I would say, I don't think he was. I just think he made a poor read, probably didn't get to see the guy that was coming underneath there and threw it right to him. That's really the only turnover I really put on him. Yes, he fumbled, I think, twice in that last drive.
See, I've heard you say this. I'm going to disagree with that, man. I mean, he's pretty willy-nilly with the ball when he's trying to maneuver in the pocket. He's always trying to change hands with it. We've seen him fumble quite a bit this year and just not lose the ball. I'm going to put that on Adrian. I mean,
it's his fault that obviously that he fumbled. He didn't secure the ball. I'm not saying that, but I just think with a little bit more organization and and removing the chaos by just calling timeout there probably prevents a turnover altogether, in my opinion. That's why you needed a turnover, because it was so chaotic. It was so there was no organization. Players didn't know what they were doing. It was just a mess. And they needed a timeout for that. And I think you call timeout there, you probably don't get the turnover.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I just thought K-State dug itself too big of a hole, like BY said. You're at home, you know, your crowd's fired up, and to give up 3 consecutive touchdown drives to start the game when you're on defense, it's not good enough. And, you know, one of the things we talked about on the podcast previewing the game was weathering the storm early on, because Sarkisian is notorious for drawing up a great game plan, but then struggling to adjust in game. And it's happened multiple times this season where Texas, as they get farther away from that script that Sarkisian has, they start to struggle. And it played out exactly that way. But the only problem is that when it played out that way, K-State was down by 21 points. I mean, the games that Texas has blown, it's been 10 to 14 points deficits for the opponents. K-State dug itself a 21-point hole and couldn't dig out of it ultimately. So, I mean, that was certainly frustrating. I know they had an opportunity to get it tied up. It's a very disappointing game. At the end of the day, though, I think Texas is the better team. I think they're the more talented team, obviously, and I just think K-State got a little bit more out-talented in this game. So it sucks, but I don't have like a hot take where I'm just angry, at the way the game played out, because at the end of the day, I just think Texas is a better team. People have to remember that by all of the advanced analytical metrics, Texas was a top 10 to 12 team in the country going into that game, despite having 3 losses on their resume. And if Texas puts it all together and comes in focused and locked in, they can beat anybody in the country. And they came in after a bye week, locked in on this game, especially early on. And it was too much for K-State to overcome.
The only frustrating part would be that last full drive that netted a field goal, made it 34-27, why they were so deliberate there. Even Chris Kleiman mentioned after the game that they needed to be a little bit quicker. Maybe it's because you didn't have Malik Knowles, you had a lot of, or sometimes without Cade Warner, and you had a lot of new bodies at receiver that hadn't played much this year, but they were just way too deliberate. And the fact that they had to run the ball, I guess they felt like they had to run the ball because the receivers were out. It just took too much time off the clock. If you don't do that, then, ultimately maybe you're not in as much of a frantic, operation on that last drive, and you're not putting your defense, in a tough position where they only have one chance and they have to get a 3-and-out or you lose. I mean, they came through. I'll give them credit for that, especially with the great play by Kobe Savage on that third down toss to Bijan Robinson. But, man, just the way they went about that field goal drive, that I think that kind of is probably what caused everything else that we saw the rest of the game.
Yeah, and I mean, Cole, definitely a lot of truth to what you said. Texas getting a focused, crisp effort from Texas for that long is going to be really tough for anybody in this league to overcome. There's no doubt about that. But I still think it is frustrating, and I don't know. Texas is the more talented team. I don't know if Texas is the better team. They certainly they'll get to claim that title by winning that game. I still feel like they have another loss coming, and that K-State may write a final chapter in this whole deal and still be the team that finishes higher in the Big 12 standings. We'll see. But yeah, there's just a lot that you can lean back on and look. And the thing that I just kept saying, I kept tweeting it, which I was tweeting too much on Saturday for sure. That was the problem. I was hanging out in the suite for part of the game, Cole, and I was just like chatting, hanging out in the back, and had my phone out the whole time. It was anyway. So someone please take my phone away from me next time. But I kept saying, like, man, all you got to do, you just need to hang around. You just need to be around going into the fourth quarter, because this happens every week with Texas. I sat and watched the entire Oklahoma State game, and it felt like almost a carbon. If you take out the Adrian Martinez interception before halftime, it felt like a carbon copy of the Oklahoma State game to me. But that's really the difference. You have that instead of you going down and getting 3 points or something at the end of the first half. Like, that's a potential 10-point swing that gave Texas 7 and just really busted it open and blew things open there. When you start making that comeback, and I saw Derek make this point after the game, the crowd gets into it sooner with the comeback in the second half, making life more difficult on Texas, more energy in the stadium. It doesn't. You don't have to wait until very late to really pick it up and then be in scramble mode there. And that to me is where I know this is not. I'm not going to sit here and crush anybody for the quarterback decision and what happened. Adrian Martinez had almost 400 total yards and 3 touchdowns, 2 turnovers. This was Nebraska Adrian Martinez in a lot of ways, because he was more dynamic, a lot more yards than what we have seen from him so far this year. But he had the 2 crucial turnovers at big spots. But I just feel like there's a chance that if you have Will Howard in the game in the first half, it doesn't turn into a 21-point deficit at halftime. Things would be a lot different. And yes, the offensive line was not at its best. And, there could be guys getting after Will Howard, a lot of sacks, moving the offense back. But it killed me that you had the huge turnover there at the end of the first half. Adrian acquitted himself well for a good portion of the game the rest of the way. I understand, but I don't know. It's just, there are a lot of what ifs. I guess I'll put it that way. To me, there are still a lot of what ifs, even though I may not be like raging angry about any of them. I don't have any super hot take either, but there are plenty of what ifs. What if you use the timeouts differently at the end of the game, which Kleiman said he wanted to run one more play? before he started to use them? What if you are a little bit faster on that drive before? What if Malik Knowles doesn't get hurt and you have him available for the last drive and a half there of the game, so that you're not playing? I mean, no offense to Xavier Lloyd, never heard of the guy in my life before Saturday, to be completely honest, and he's out there playing receiver in the last possession of the game. So to me, there still are a lot of what ifs that come out of this game. What if Adrian Martinez recognizes, was it Phillip Brooks in the back of the end zone on 4th and goal? What if he recognizes that quicker, gets the ball out on time, and that's a touchdown? Sure. What if you get the flag, which it was borderline? I mean, I've got a laundry list of things still that do frustrate me.
When it comes to the quarterback thing, I'll kind of dig into that. I just don't. Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's some people have drawn a hard line on it. I haven't. I don't think that the quarterback selection determined the outcome of the game. Yes, Adrian Martinez threw the really bad interception there at the end of the second quarter. He missed Malik Knowles for a touchdown too, I believe. That was in the first half, I want to say. And Knowles was jumping up and down. He missed him. And then you had the fumble, obviously, at the end of the game. And this isn't meant to run anything down Will Howard. This is just to show an example that even though things work out, it doesn't mean that they didn't also happen, right? So remember, in Will Howard's first game, he did throw an interception against TCU. Remember that when he threw that.
That was like late game. He had to make a play. He just kind of threw it.
Right, but we're talking about the turnovers. Will Howard's been a very turnover-prone player throughout almost the entirety of his career. So he threw that
one this year, though. Not new Will.
He threw that interception against TCU. The touchdown, his first pass that he threw to Cade Warner, that's intercepted in any other time. Cade Warner made the play of his life.
He's giving his receiver a chance to make a play, man. I don't know. We see this a little differently. We see this a little differently.
Okay, but I'm just saying that Will Howard has done this too. And then against TCU, he lost Malik Knowles in the corner of the end zone as well. So he missed a touchdown. And he missed Sammy Wheeler squeaking down the middle of the field against Oklahoma State. That would have been a touchdown. All I am saying is that the same mistakes that Adrian Martinez made, Will Howard also made them against Oklahoma State and TCU. They just happened to not matter as much. But just because it works out for you in a random way doesn't mean that it wasn't a problem, or that it makes him a better choice to be the quarterback. Because if he makes those same mistakes again against Texas, then the outcome's the same. He's still throwing, he had 2 or 3 interceptable balls against Oklahoma State because he threw behind a guy and the guy dropped it, or the wide receiver made a play on the ball just to prevent it from being picked too. I mean, Will Howard's still throwing interceptable balls.
The way I would frame it up is this. If you knew going into the game that Will Howard would go 24 of 36 for 329 yards passing, 2 touchdowns and 1 interception, would you have taken that? Because for me, I gladly would have taken that if it was Will Howard. So I was, I didn't have an issue really with Adrian. I thought Adrian played well. I mean, the turnover, the interception was a backbreaker. It came at a terrible time. There's no doubt about that. And it really hurt K-State's chances to win that game, but mistakes do happen. K-State has been nearly perfect from a turnover standpoint this year. And something that they've really minimized over the last several years is interceptions when they have Skylar Thompson or Adrian at quarterback or Will Howard. Will Howard's had several interceptions actually in his career. But what my point is that Adrian had been phenomenal for taking care of the football. That was his first interception all year. And you're going to make a mistake every now and then. And that's a good Texas defense. And he made a really bad read or bad throw in that situation. And that was a backbreaker, no doubt, as I said. But at the end of the day, Adrian, against the Texas defense, and I tweeted this out, K-State's offense averaged 6.6 yards per play Saturday, which was the most allowed by Texas in a game this season. And the 9.1 yards per pass attempt, which is an incredible number, tied the season high allowed by the Longhorns. And K-State also ran the ball for 4 yards a carry against a Texas defense that had held teams below 4 yards, every opponent below 4 yards in a game this year per rush, except for Alabama. So K-State's offensive numbers were really good, aside from, you would have liked to have had a little bit more points, settling for a field goal, having the turnover on downs, the interception. I get it. It sucks. K-State should have had more points. I'm sure Adrian regrets a couple of the decisions he made, to DY's point, and your point, John, the pass to Phillip Brooks on the 4th and 2. He needs to see that a little bit earlier. It should have been PI. Defender doesn't turn around, runs through the receiver. That's got to be flagged. And then he did miss Malik Knowles. But to what DY had said, Brock Heward on the broadcast of the OSU game pointed out a play where Malik Knowles was wide open in the end zone and Will Howard didn't see him. You're going to miss open guys on occasion. You don't see the whole field. And And so Adrian missed a couple of open guys as well and mistakes that he would like to have back. But at the end of the day, if you would have told me going into that game, those were the offensive numbers K-State would put up, that they would have 468 yards of offense and the turnovers would be 2-2 overall, I would have said I like K-State's chances to have a shot to win that game. And I just thought Adrian played well, and he eluded a lot of sacks. And I don't know, he did hold the ball too long on several occasions probably, which meant he was in a situation where he had to elude some sacks. But there were also some plays where Will Howard probably does get sacked that Adrian was able to elude and escape a negative play and make something of it.
And Will Howard also missed the touchdown to Cade Warner where he was wide open against TCU, completely wide open, just touch over his head. So they're making some of the same things what Adrian did, Will had been doing, and I think people just kind of gloss over it because the outcome ended up in those games being what they wanted, actually not against TCU. Some other things to point out: Adrian Martinez's completion percentage was the highest by any Kansas State quarterback this season, any game. Threw for 67% passing, I believe. And then his yards per completion was the second best of his season, too. And the only reason why it wasn't his best was because the two big ones against Iowa State, and he didn't throw a ton that game.
It was his second most at K-State since 2014 for passing yards in a game, and the third most in Adrian Martinez's 47 games that he's played in his career as far as passing yards. And, the fumble at the end, what I will say is he did put the ball to what John said earlier. He put the ball in the turf too much on Saturday, and he was fortunate. He's
done it all year. He's kind of done that all year. He's had a penchant for doing that all year. They've been pretty lucky with fumbles this year.
There was a fumble. Texas was offsides, and K-State recovered it, but he also had that fumble in the third quarter, I believe, where K-State got it back, and Texas had lined up in the neutral zone. So he put the ball in the turf 3 times and only lost it once, and got to clean that up for sure. The fumble at the end of the game, K-State, they came with a 4-man rush. Kind of Coburn is a heck of a nose tackle, and he made a play. Adrian's got to take care of the ball better. That one doesn't burn me quite as much just because I was looking out there and I'm just like, I have a hard time seeing K-State scoring at this point without Malik Knowles on the field, and watching K-State's guys trying to get open out there. It felt like it was going to have to be like someone like Deuce just making guys miss in the passing game. And
he was trying to do too much.
Yeah. So I say all this, like, I hope it doesn't come across that DY and I are trying to downgrade Will Howard when we say this. Like, we're not. He's also a very good player. My point is, like, if you would have told me either one of those guys would put up the numbers that they did on Saturday, what Adrian did, I would have taken it. My bigger issue was the defense, and then to the clock management point of what occurred with how K-State handled that.
Finishing drives, turnovers. Yeah.
Look, whatever. I feel like Will Howard was great, terrific at finishing drives over the 2-game stretch, but I'm not entirely sure the outcome of the game changes if Will is in the game. But do I very much wonder about it? Yes, I do. I do. And I think Will Howard has been a little bit better at protecting the ball than at least what Derek was giving him credit for. But Adrian has for much of the year been pretty good at taking care of the ball. And I'll say this, one of the things that was a talking point for a while that Adrian definitely shattered in that game is like, all right, what happens when that first interception does come? Like, is he going to go back into being scared? Is he going to go back into, the mental issues and some of those things that seemed to plague him at Nebraska? And I mean, he answered that in pretty resounding fashion by playing really, really well in the second half after the interception happened. So that was even after coming out and going 3 and out right on the first possession of the second half. And a lot of antsiness in the stadium, I think, at that point. And he just marched right on through. So, I mean, I guess at this point we assume, right, that this is no more quarterback controversy. Like this is going to be Adrian's deal moving forward.
Yeah, especially since you just won a full game without playing Will Howard, because then you're crunching that window. And I know you get annoyed by this, but at this point, if you're not going to play him for a full game against Texas, you do have to begin to consider the red shirt, because it becomes pointless not to if you're not going to play him against Texas. So that's the way I look at it too. One other thing that just kind of came across my mind. I've said it before, but not on this podcast. But when we're talking Adrian and we're talking Will Howard, I think one thing that does lead people to want to lean one direction, and that being towards Will Howard, is it does look a lot prettier when he does it, right? Everything is more on script, planned. a little bit machine-like. Like it just looks the way it's supposed to. And Adrian Martinez got the job done on Saturday. I'm not going to take anything away from him. And whatever way you get it done, you get it done. And you don't apologize for it. But he does everything a little bit more unorthodox, a little, off script. It seems like a very razor-thin margin the way that he can make plays just because of what he's escaping in the pocket. That's because he's that good at that stuff, but it just doesn't look as pretty or as smooth, and it probably makes you a little bit more nervous as a fan when you watch it too, because it's just not comfortable.
Yeah, and he doesn't have the arm strength that Will does. How many? It works. It works. Guys get open and he scrambles and it works. But the entire year when he's throwing the ball downfield, it just feels like it flutters a lot of times. And there were 2 or 3 more of those on Saturday where it's just kind of floating up there. It reminded me of the Oklahoma game. Some of the passes like to send it down the field where it's just kind of floating. And you're like, God, how was Phillip Brooks wide open enough that still got to him when it took 6 seconds in the air? So yeah, you're right. It doesn't. And that is total part of it for me. Like Will Howard went in the game and I was like, man, God damn, this is what offense is supposed to look like. This is, I watch other teams do this week in and week out, and I haven't seen K-State operate like this offensively in ever. I don't know, the 90s. So that's a huge part of it to me. It is. Absolutely.
When we had Brock Heward on, what did he say? That the difference is Will processes things quicker, right? Which leads in tune, when Adrian's back there holding the ball a little bit longer, it doesn't look as in rhythm. The offense doesn't look in the same rhythm now, getting the job done, but it doesn't look quite the same. So I get that point. I do want to address a couple of actual frustrating points for me. When K-State cut the lead to 31-24, there was 14 minutes and 44 seconds left in that game. It was the first play of the fourth quarter where K-State gets a touchdown to Cade Warner. And to me, one of the back-breaking drives was K-State allowing Texas to go down the field and get that field goal, an 11-play, 64-yard drive. You got the crowd back into the game in a frenzy, and you just let them go down the field, and credit to holding them for a field goal. But that was the one drive Texas scored, and that was the one time felt like K-State's defense really had to come up with a stop. And what made it even more frustrating was some self-inflicted mistakes. The personal foul on Daniel Green out of bounds, that kind of a baffling defensive holding call on Eli Huggins, which I really struggle to understand that.
What was that? I don't even
remember. It was a phantom call. I think I get your point there, Cole. The only thing I would say, give up 3 points. I have a hard time quibbling a little bit. You only give 3 points the whole half. So you're almost demanding a shutout, which I get what you're saying. It's true. It was a bad timing of it, but that's the only part that would make me kind of back away from that a little bit. But to your point, what made it hurt even more, I think they give up 3 straight third down conversions on that.
Yeah, it wasn't so much it's just that the timing of it, right? That was the time where I felt like K-State could have completely swung the game in their favor. If they could have gotten another 3 and out or gotten off the field, and then K-State would have had plenty of time to tie it up. So unfortunate what occurred there. And then the clock management stuff, again, you get the heck of a play by Kobe Savage to get him in the 4th and 9.
To your point, how did Bijan Robinson hang on to that ball? I've watched it a few times. He didn't even know Kobe Savage was coming.
I felt like I blinked and Kobe Savage was there. I was like, how did he get there so quick? He blew it up, and Texas is very fortunate that Bijan Robinson didn't fumble there, because Kobe Savage almost intercepted that sweep. And so credit to Bijan Robinson for hanging on to the football, but it also, you got the 2 timeouts there. Chris Kleiman used the timeout after the 2nd down play, but he doesn't use it after the 3rd down stop. And Texas burns another 38, 39 seconds off the clock. And then K-State gets the ball back with 2:30 instead of 3 minutes, 10 seconds. I'm a big believer in you control what you control. So when you are on defense, you use the timeouts. You don't save them for offense, because on offense, you can control how quick you go. You can run a hurry up, you can go out of bounds, you get a first down, etc. But when you're on defense and the opponent can run 40 seconds off the clock, that's when you use the timeout. So I thought K-State should have used a timeout there, still had one in their pocket with over 3 minutes left for the offense. And then the drive that you guys talked about where K-State got a field goal, very frustrating. I guess my biggest frustration is K-State just feels like they've never had a hurry up offense. A 2-minute no huddle offense. We hear about wanting to get the pace quickened, and they have improved the pace of play. They've snapped the ball numerous times with 20, 25 seconds on the play clock. But when push comes to shove, most teams in America, and especially in the Big 12, they get the ball with 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I'm thinking, oh, they're going to score easily. Like, that is way too much time. But with K-State, it feels so methodical still. Like, I'm just like praying. It feels like it's going to take a miracle to score in 2 minutes and 30 seconds in that situation, which I know sounds a little weird because we just talked about going into this Texas game that K-State had 8 of their last 9 touchdown drives that were 4 plays or less. But to not have a more sense of urgency and to get down the field quicker, that was certainly frustrating. K-State went 35, 38 yards, and it took 2 minutes on that last drive. I mean, I don't know. Those are some of the frustrating points for me. But like I mentioned, I don't have a ton of hot takes on this game. I just felt like K-State got outclassed a little bit.
Well, I do think the receiver injuries definitely hurt their ability to move as quickly as they wanted to. I don't know if this winds up making a difference. They obviously converted the play. But I thought the most opportune time on the last drive to use one of the timeouts to just settle things down was before the 4th down play. I mean, I could not believe that they didn't call timeout before the play that winds up being an improvisation and Adrian to deuce for the 1st down there. I don't know if that has an effect if, the play after that, who knows, but it just felt like everybody kind of needed like just stop, chill. And especially with the gravity of that play coming up, I could not believe that timeout wasn't used. It seemed like pushing your luck a little bit too far, trying to wait for the extra time out there. But K-State was just in a really difficult spot. And I think that bears emphasis here. I haven't seen the TV broadcast, so I don't know if they were talking about the fact that the receivers that K-State had out there and how significant that is to the offense. But I was just sitting there thinking, like, this is going to have to be Adrian with his legs. So, yes, protect the ball better. And I think, Adrian has a recurring issue with not protecting the ball when he's trying to get out of the pocket. But I will say, I think he was doing the right thing, which is, the way that they were going to move the ball at that point was going to have to be either Adrian taking off and running or Adrian buying time and scrambling and just something off script. I think that was the way that they were going to have to move it against Texas down in that last drive.
You said it.
Yeah. Well, another thing that I know is a bugaboo is definitely special teams. K-State started how many drives from the freaking 15-yard line throughout the game because Texas was like daring K-State to run one back and daring Malik Knowles, who's an All-American kick return man, to beat them. And repeatedly, special teams unit got whipped or the return unit, the kick return unit got whipped. We've seen Phillip Brooks be pretty hesitant to catch punts now for a long time too. It just, where K-State used to always win so many of these little things, field position battles and picking up extra field position, big plays from special teams. It's not really happening right now. And there seems to be a decent amount of slippage there.
Well, particularly on the kick return. I know you guys have a quibble with the punt return and Phil Brooks not catching it. That one slips my mind. I guess I don't have a play or a rep where I remember where Brooks should have came up and gotten and didn't. Either way, Texas didn't put the ball very much at all, so that's probably part of the reason why I don't remember. Kick returns are a problem. They have been for a few weeks now. The biggest issue is, credit to Texas, that kicker was putting it in a perfect spot each time too. We say he's daring Kansas State to run it out, and he was, and they were, but that's also a really good spot to put it in terms for your coverage too. You're putting it on one side of the field rather than the middle, so you can kind of really corral it. So credit to Texas for having a really strong kick coverage unit and executing it very well. But Kansas State, this wasn't the only game where that's been a problem for them. And you talked about it. They got stopped at the 15-yard line on, I think, 3 or 4 different kick returns. And that adds up over time. You're surrendering then, around 50 yards of field position just in the kick return game. I know the fans aren't going to like this, and it's not something that Kansas State has ever been forced to do. But if that's really the trend, and it certainly has been, then they're going to have a hard conversation about being one of those teams that just fair catches the dang thing and takes it at the 25.
Yeah, I was trying to find the special teams numbers that our guy KSU_fan puts together, but I think going into that game against Texas, K-State was 80th overall in the country in special teams. And I can't recall any kick returns that really exploded this year. Maybe I'm missing. I know K-State had a punt return or two where the Missouri comes to mind, obviously, but it feels like the return game has been lackluster. I know when K-State had 5 kick returns on Saturday that started inside the 20-yard line, including 3, I think. One was at the 10, one was at the 12, and another was at the 15-yard line. So you're putting yourself in a long situation. You need to drive a long field against a Texas defense that was really a top 25 defense in the country. That doesn't make things any easier, certainly. And I noticed like Texas was doing something different on the kicks, where if you notice like their sideline, the left-hand side of their kick return unit, all shaded completely toward the right-hand side. So they left about 25 yards of open field when they lined up on the kickoff. They were daring K-State to run it to the right. They were just angle kicking it toward the boundary to Malik Knowles and then collapsing. And K-State just didn't have the speed to be able to bounce it to the perimeter where they had, kind of shielded against. So I never saw K-State really adjust to that either on special teams. So that was disappointing. And the punt returns, like, I don't. The thing is, like, I feel like Phillip Brooks the last few games hasn't caught many of the balls kicking there and just let them roll. And I just recall Saturday, like, there was a low line drive kick into the wind that I thought he should have been able to go up and get. He lets it roll. And then he lets it roll on that last punt with 2 minutes and 40 seconds left in the game as well. And from my vantage point, I can't tell how many yards they gained off of that Texas on the bounce, but still, you let it roll, that kills more time on the clock too. So I digress. It's just a disappointing area where, you feel like special teams in a game like that, where another team is more talented, can be the differentiator in a game. And K-State just doesn't have that this year to rely on.
Well, and I wonder out loud, South Carolina special teams have been pretty good this year. It's won them a game, at least early on in the season. You can definitely remember that. And Stanton Weber is no longer on this staff. You're pretty far away now from Sean Snyder, Stanton Weber, and the guys that were left over that were kind of special teams disciples of the Bill Snyder era. And it felt like there was still a residual effect, for a long time from Snyder with that. And when you pair it with the kick issues that they've had this year, which seem, by the way, much better. Shout out to Ty Zentner for seemingly bringing us a little bit of calm right now at the kicking position. But just there have been a bevy of issues this year, and it just makes me wonder, the further and further they get away from that, is that something you're going to have to rectify somehow? I don't think K-State's going to go back to the days of having a special teams coach, but going out and finding somebody in the offseason to bring in. I think Stanton Weber was like an analyst, right, at the end of his time at K-State. So find somebody else. Quality control. You're right.
Quality control. And they replaced. They have a special teams quality control. It's Will Burnham.
Okay. Well, I'm not trying to call anybody out here or anything at all, but I just that feels to me like an area they may need to address, because we make fun of it at Iowa State, but like Matt Campbell, and we always do this comparison between Kleiman and Campbell, because I do think ultimately they're fairly similar coaches. But Matt Campbell has been really good in a lot of areas, but the thing Iowa State fans drives them nuts every year, they're not very good at all in special teams, and I don't want it to devolve into that. You're going to have different strengths and different weaknesses as a coach. I don't think Kleiman is nearly the tactician that Bill Snyder is, but in today's day and age, the way he believes in his guys and creates culture in a program, like, those things are really important and help them win games. So he's doing it in different ways. But I think at K-State, it's always going to be a place where you probably need some special teams juice to help get you over the hump. So
I realize that it's not a decision or a choice that they want to make, but you alleviate one of them by just fair catching kickoffs.
It does take away it takes away some upside for you, though.
It takes away what we're complaining about too. So
yeah, okay. So you're talking about like within the context of this season, correct?
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Okay.
I'm not saying it doesn't have to be permanently, but maybe these last 3 games, that has to be a decision that is contemplated. Yeah. Because look, if you give up 50, 60 yards of field position against Baylor, you're not going to win.
Yeah, I'm torn on it, because anytime you can get the ball in Malik Knowles' hands, with a chance to make a play, I kind of like that opportunity.
Against Texas, you probably need it. Against Baylor, Kansas, West Virginia, I'm not sure. Yeah.
I know we haven't touched on it, guys, but what were your thoughts on the impact of losing Julius Brents had on the 4th play of the game?
That hurts you in the running game more than people think, because he is probably one of the best run defenders at cornerback in the entire country. But I guess when it happened, I knew how good Brent's was at the bubbles and in run defense, but I was terrified because that probably meant that there was going to be someone like Jacob Parrish and Omar Daniels getting stuck in man coverage against the Texas wideouts. And while that did happen, I didn't think that they were ever exploited. So it was almost like a good kind of surprise that they were able to still play man up when they replaced Julius Brents. And Echo Boy does just playing out of his mind last month.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I worry about I didn't really have too much of an issue with the pass game at all. I mean, Quinn Ewers dropped some balls in that were just terrific throws. It feels like they really have something in Jacob Parrish, which has been a nice revelation this year. But I did wonder about the run game in the first half, like how much Brents could have helped, made a difference, even if he makes a difference on one drive, right? I mean, how much does that swing things? How much different do things look coming down the stretch if he makes a difference on one drive, one play?
Maybe
that first Texas drive. Now, this is a pass play, but, 3rd and 9 and first drive of the game, you have Texas backed up, and then they get that conversion and go down and score pretty easily. If there's one drive where he can just make a play using those long arms somehow, whether it's in the run game or the pass game, just to get a punt, I mean, how much of a difference would that have made? That's what I sit and wonder about.
The touchdown to Xavier Worthy probably is going to happen against any corner in college. It might happen against NFL corners. That was a sick route. He hadn't even made the cut, and the ball was already in the air. That kind of blew my mind, just the level of execution there between and athleticism there between Xavier Worthy and Quinn Ewers. The only thing when it comes to the run defense, Julius Brents is really good in run defense, and he's a really good tackler, and he leverages plays really good on the edge and sets the edge, especially in the bubble screens too, which is basically another form of a running game. But I tried to think maybe he stops one of those big plays from leaking out too far, like when you get some of those chunk plays like the 30-yard runs, because when I think about it, I just don't think I can't remember Kansas State being exploited on the perimeter in the running game.
Yeah, I guess I recalled several edge runs that they tried to get on the edge against Kansas State with the toss sweeps and jet sweeps and the motion and everything. And I really, with you guys on the point of the run defense, like I felt like that's where it impacted K-State the most, because he's the most physical corner K-State has and the best tackler they have. And you're replacing him with a true freshman in Jacob Parrish, who has a really bright future, but is probably more of a cover corner at this point and not a guy that's going to lay the wood with his size and physicality. He's still a very young player. And so I think that hurt. The only other thing I wonder about is, did K-State have to devote any more resource? Like if you have a guy like Julius Brents, can you rely on him one-on-one in coverage more, right? But then you put a true freshman out there on a Jordan Whittington or Xavier Worthy. Do you have to devote more resources than a safety or something toward the passing game and covering up on that, worried about that? Or if you have a Julius Brents, could you devote an extra resource toward stopping the run, like an extra safety, cheat up a little bit more because you got a guy like Brents, an all Big 12 corner on the edge? I don't know. Like, I think it hurt. You got Daniel Green back, which was significant, played a lot of snaps. That was meaningful. I didn't necessarily expect to see him on the field, but losing Brents was a blow, especially early in the game, kind of sucked the life out of the stadium. And, just a rule that I absolutely loathe, that is an ejectable play. There is no intent there. That is not a play that, you can flag a 15-yard penalty there. That's fine. But that is not a play that should lead to an ejection for an entire game. They have to change the rule.
Yeah. I mean, I looked at it right away and I was like, I think it's, but by definition, I mean, he was going to be done. So I don't sit here and have a ton of regret about it necessarily, but you're right. I mean, the rule is frustrating, and I think we're probably, hopefully headed towards that, like a flagrant 1, flagrant 2 type situation.
I don't think so. I think it's going to be ejectable. I don't think that they're going away from that. Okay. I think they're leaning into that more.
It's so stupid. I mean, it's every other sport has a flagrant 1 or 2, with you can judge intent, and you can judge intent pretty well when a guy is trying to, really injure somebody and lower the crown of the helmet. Julius Brents didn't lower his crown, kept his helmet up. And yeah, targeting can be shoulder pad to the head, anything like that on a defenseless receiver. So fine. But, I take more issue with a quarterback throwing the ball high over the middle of the field and you're playing full speed football. What do you expect a guy to do? I just hate so much about the rule. I'm fine with player safety, but I just don't see value in ejecting a guy for a whole game on a play like that when you can clearly tell that that's not football is a fast flying game, as you guys know, and to be able to pull up there and avoid the hit, like, it's just so hard to do.
It was a bad break. It was a really bad break. There's no doubt about that. Well, it was a big recruiting day. I mean, I saw John Randall was in the house. It's John Randall, right? John Randall Jr. I always get a mix of John and Joe. Dylan Edwards was back, obviously, which created some waves there. Avery Johnson tweeting about that. They had another running back in from California, Nigel Osborne. Is that right?
Yep.
A lot of big names. Asa Newsome, if I'm pronouncing that correctly as well, 4-star linebacker. Like, yeah. I mean,
Trace Spivey.
Yep. I saw him. I was in the elevator with Trace Spivey when I was going up to the suite. I told him to listen to 3 Ma. He didn't seem too enthused about it, but we'll see. I don't know what that means about his visit. But either way, I mean, a big recruiting weekend. Do we have any early indications of how well that went?
Not necessarily. I think the Dylan Edwards thing, if that materializes in any level, I think it's going to take some time and some effort on his part. So I think that was like one step, not necessarily a step away down the line. I think maybe a beginning step. There's still stuff that needs to be accomplished on that front. Spivey, that one's just going to be tough. Like, they gave him a really good environment and a really good weekend to be in Manhattan. That is for sure. But he is an Oklahoma State legacy, and they want him as well. His mother went there. His father did not. Junior Spivey played Major League Baseball, Arizona Diamondbacks. That's why he lives in Arizona. But he's from Oklahoma City too, so they're really familiar with that part of the country and the school itself, Oklahoma State. So, gun to my head, I felt pretty good about them landing the running back from California the entire time. Nigel Osborne, I would be surprised if that one didn't go their way. But that could depend on their approach at the position too. So we'll see how they want to maneuver and assess and move around the parts there at running back, because there's a lot of things that they have to consider, right? Because they're going to want probably quite a few. I would imagine. I don't know if even 2 is going to be enough, and they're going to want to get a little older, because I don't think 22 is coming back.
Well, so a couple of questions that I have here. Like, what are things still trending positively with Randall?
I don't think so. It's probably in a standstill. I think there's just in a little bit of a different light than Edwards, but there's still things that kind of has to happen for him to, totally be on the same wavelength as Kansas State.
And then with Dylan, I mean, is this like you think it's all about, like, you think he wants to come back to K-State and he needs to do the work, or is this like just checking, like, where is Dylan's head at in all this? I understand.
I think
K-State's head would be at.
I think Dylan Edwards is the one that has ignited this flame again. I don't think it was Kansas State, like, groveling back. I don't think it was that. I do think, Dylan Edwards, and I said this at the time, right? That wouldn't surprise me. The closer it gets to signing day, it always happens with kids, right? Closer it gets to signing day, you realize how far away school is, right? Or you realize maybe what you thought you wanted wasn't what you really, really want. Everything becomes real. You're about to put pen to paper, right? So I think, and this is what I said would happen, but I think that's kind of what's happening. I think it's getting a little bit more real. He realizes, hey, everything that I want to accomplish, I could have done just here. I didn't have to do everything that I did. So maybe a little second guessing his decision and realizing, what he kind of gave up, because I do think he ignited this flame. Obviously, he's always thought playing with Avery Johnson is appealing. And I think, he probably lost sight of that. And it's in a new era of recruiting too, where I think you can get distracted by some superficial things and lose sight of what's really should be important and what should be number one. So I think that's what's really going on with Dylan Edwards. And I think Kansas State would welcome him back if it's done the right way.
How do you prioritize them? Because you're saying you feel like they would land Nigel Osborne. Like, how are you prioritizing running backs then at this point?
That's why once I said that, then I backed off immediately, because they do have to, like, we'll see. It'll be interesting. I don't know exactly what their plan is for running back, but they have a slippery slope kind of to operate in here. It'll depend on what they think is going to happen with Dylan Edwards, how much they like Nigel Osborne. They could like him a lot. I don't have that, 100%, but they put themselves in a position where they have options, and I think that's what they needed to do. Because on top of that, they're going to probably need, look, that's not going to be it, right? They might need to grab someone that can play right away at running back too.
Yeah. I know K-State fans are frustrated with the Dylan Edwards recruitment and how that went down, but it's become apparent. Avery Johnson tweeted with Dylan, if Avery Johnson wants Dylan Edwards in the fold, then hopefully K-State fans will welcome him back. Certainly take the talent, extremely talented kid, and hopefully they can make that work. When is signing day again, DY, in December? Are we a month out?
It's I don't have the exact date for you, but it's in the middle of December. It's usually like December 15th to the 20th in that wheelhouse.
Yeah. Well, that'll be an exciting show for us to do. Maybe there'll be some fireworks. I wonder if Dylan Edwards, you think he'll sign in December? Or
I think he's an early enrollee. So
That's right. The Junior Spivey, Trey Spivey thing. I just remember MLB The Show back in the day, like Junior Spivey. I was always playing with him, the Arizona Diamondbacks. So when I saw Trey Spivey come across the recruiting radar, that was interesting. I mean, K-State already beat Oklahoma State for receiver, right? And Wesley Watson just a couple weeks ago, which was a nice get.
Already have 3 receivers.
Yeah, that was certainly a nice get. So
knew that was going to have to be a big class. Basketball signing days this week too.
Yeah. Asa Newsome, I mean, that's a huge visitor. I mean, I watched that dude's film. I don't know what K-State's chances are, DY, and I know he's kind of hard to read, but I get Arthur Brown vibes. I know you didn't cover Arthur Brown, but like he just looks like so mature, but kind of like a robot, like the way he handles everything. And Arthur was that way as well. But his film is very impressive.
He's very thorough in his process. It's a hard one to read. I think Iowa has been the favorite for the duration of his recruitment. Now, not a whole lot of stability there at Iowa right now.
Nothing sounds more exciting and stable than going and playing football for the good old Iowa Hawkeyes right now.
Unless you're a defender, it might. If you are a believer that things aren't going to change a whole lot, playing defense for Iowa might be appealing, and probably is appealing. So, but Asa Newsome, sans Dylan Edwards, because I think he's probably one of the more talented players that I've covered since covering Kansas State recruiting in 2017. But sans that, I think Asa Newsome is pretty high up there, to Cole's point. I really like that dude. He's a 4-star at On3 and top. I think he's their top remaining target that's uncommitted.
From Edwards. He's what, almost 6'4", and he runs, like watching him run is very impressive. He's a long linebacker with great speed. And like, if I'm considering Iowa, I start to wonder, like, all right, how long is Ferenz going to be there at this point?
Yeah, that's like just the stability question that I would have. What kind of like makes me like, and maybe they just knew that they had no shot. I don't know, but Iowa State never offered
him. Oh, interesting. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the thing with playing for, like, you want to be pissed off every single day because your offense can't score. I mean, it's great. You're playing a great defense. You want to be put on short fields all day because Spencer Petras is farting out another intercept. Like, come on, man.
Maybe it gives you more opportunity to show off then, right? Yeah.
I guess. I don't know. I can't imagine that seems – also that you can go 7-5 and play in the Music City Bowl. Like, I
could make a joke, but I won't.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I realize glass houses, whatever. But
you could have said that in the Liberty Bowl, right?
I would like the Music City Bowl to be in the Big 12 fold.
Yeah, can we swap Liberty and Music City?
Yes. Good Lord, please. Yes. Okay. Well, just quick initial thoughts on Baylor. I mean, I'll be honest. It's going to be tough. Baylor is red hot right now. They've won 3 straight. They've been able to get it going with a running game, even without the guy who had been the star, Richard Reese, for a lot of this year. On Saturday, he only had 4 carries against Oklahoma, but they pluck a guy named Squirrel Williams in there for almost 200 yards against Oklahoma. But I did not have a great feeling going into Texas. Legitimately, I did not. I have a better feeling going into Baylor than I do the Texas game. That doesn't necessarily mean K-State's going to win. It will be a night environment on the road. Baylor, defending Big 12 champs. They've had a lot of success recently. I think the world of Dave Aranda. But the matchup with Texas and just how damn talented they were is what really, really scared me. I like the way K-State matches up with Baylor much better than I did against Texas.
Yeah, this game will not be a game where you think Kansas State is incredibly out-talented or out-athleted against Texas. And from a matchup standpoint, I really do like this one a lot more. And Baylor did run the heck out of the ball, and they have done that all year. So credit to them. But that kind of is conducive to Kansas State because they're not going to do it with, two of the toughest guys to tackle in the Big 12, like a Bijan Robinson and Kendre Miller, who's probably the most underrated player in the league. I don't think he gets enough credit for what he has done this year just because everyone wants to talk about the TCU passing game. But look, Baylor can trot out any running back, and they seem to have success, but they don't have Bijan Robinson and Kendre Miller. They don't have guys like that. And I think that's to Kansas State's advantage. And what they did against Oklahoma, Baylor on the ground is impressive, but Kansas State did that too. So everybody kind of doing that to the Oklahoma defense. I do like the matchup. It is going to be a heck of a atmosphere, I believe. Baylor doesn't typically have robust football atmospheres. I get that, but they now control their own destiny, and it's a night game.
And I will say this too: Blake Shapen has been a turnover machine at times this year. I know K-State has not forced a turnover yet on the road, but that's going to change. I think it would change against Shapen.
Yeah, it's going to have to change if they want to win.
I get nightmares about night games at Baylor. So it just brings back so many terrible flashbacks. I was also at the 14 game when K-State had a Big 12 title on the line as well. Baylor is going to try to line up and play physical smash mouth football to what DY was saying. I mean, the last 3 games, they've run for 262 yards per game, close to 5 yards per carry. And they've ran the ball on 66% of their offensive plays over the last 3 weeks. They're going to line up. They're going to run 3 or 4 different running backs at you. They're going to rely on their offensive line, and they're just going to try and run power at you. I mean, they'll go under center a lot of times too, and just traditional run formations and come at you downhill and try to out-physical you. I think K-State can hold up against that somewhat well. I'll be curious. I mean, Gavin Holmes is a home run threat in the receiving game, big play receiver. I don't even think he had a catch though last week in their win at OU. They were battling a flu bug that was going through their locker room. That's why Richard Reese only had 4 carries in the game. They minimized that. But, then you mentioned it, John Craig Williams, has a career day against Oklahoma. So they have so many different dudes. What's weird about Baylor is their defense. Early in the year, especially, their defense looked pretty poor, especially in Morgantown, West Virginia loss. They're playing better now. They've forced 8 turnovers in the last 2 games, 8 interceptions, actually. So that's a little bit disconcerting. And it's going to be a raucous atmosphere as well. Baylor controls their destiny now. I mean, this is a huge game, a night game. And if they win out, they're going to the Big 12 championship, and they know that. So it'll be a raucous atmosphere. Baylor will be fired up, and we'll see what happens. But I think the one thing I'll say about Baylor is, and I think KSU_fan had pointed this out in our group chat, but they haven't played all of the best teams in the Big 12 yet. I mean, so a lot of their numbers are inflated by who they have played. They haven't had to play TCU, K-State, or Texas. So, I mean, they've got 3 road wins, which is impressive in itself, at OU, at Oklahoma State, and then at Texas Tech. But I still don't know what necessarily to make of Baylor, just because they've been so up and down. They lost to a BYU team that's bad. And I know that was early in the year, but they are an up and down football team too.
Yeah, we could talk about the Big 12 championship picture too. I was just going to bring this. So I've got the schedules up in front of me. I mean K-State has the best one left. The easiest.
I would say yes by a nose, because it's not easy. I mean, Kansas looked pretty damn good on Saturday. I understand they're playing broken Oklahoma State, but that offense continues to roll. So you got at Baylor, at West Virginia, and Kansas for K-State. Baylor, to your guys' point, has K-State, TCU, at Texas. TCU is at Texas, at Baylor, but then Iowa State at home. Texas is TCU, at Kansas, and then Baylor. So they get 2 of the 3 in Austin, but man, TCU, Kansas, and Baylor are 3 teams I wouldn't want to be messing around with. So it's going to be a wild last 3 weeks of the season based on those schedules and where everybody's at. Everybody controls their own destiny except K-State, who needs a Texas loss in there.
I think, man, see, with Texas having to play TCU and Baylor, look, I think Texas beats TCU this weekend. Unfortunately, I think that's the case. I think TCU's kind of running on borrowed time a little bit. I think they've ran into a lot of luck, and I think now they're going to run into a team that is actually more talented than them, and they're going to meet their maker a little bit, I think. But, and if Kansas State can get past Baylor, what I do like to happen, what I do think could happen, I think Baylor is a team that can beat Texas.
Yeah, look, I don't want to come across.
Kansas is a team that could beat Texas and Lawrence.
Yeah, but I think Texas gets revenge. Yeah,
I can't see KU beating Texas because I can't see KU stopping Bijan Robinson.
You're probably right. Yeah.
And Texas is pissed. They want that game probably worse than any other game, which is funny.
Yeah, they've heard the jokes enough probably, and they'll come into that one motivated. And KU could gear up and try to stop the run as much as they can, and just, as bad as KU's run defense is, defense overall, I just can't see them able to stop them. So, look, I don't want to come across too negative here, but I honestly, it feels like in my mind a less than 20% chance that K-State can make it to Arlington now, because you're talking about K-State having to win out, which is very hard in itself, starting with at Baylor. And then you're talking about Texas needing to lose a game, probably at home. And I honestly think Texas is going to win out. So
I disagree. I think Texas is losing. I think the tougher part here is K-State winning out.
I think it just depends. I think Texas is beating TCU and Kansas, so it's going to come down to the Baylor game for me when they play Baylor. K-State. Actually, Baylor's going to decide this, I think, because they're playing Texas and K-State. So I think they're going to basically decide who goes.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Be a wild couple of weeks. We'll be here to chronicle it all. Drinking 360 vodka, Ben Holiday bottled and bond bourbon along the way. Appreciate their support as always. We got basketball starting this week as we record this here on Monday morning. Basketball is coming tonight. So there's a lot going on. Stay tuned to the podcast feed this week. We'll keep you all up to date. Appreciate Jed Marshall behind the scenes. For Colt Manbeck and Derek Young, I'm John Kurtz. Thanks for listening to another Free Mark.